Why is the guy streaming while running down on 20 different accounts at the same time still not banned? I'm assuming those accounts are being banned. The issue is not that he's being banned. The issue is that he can create more accounts and just keep doing it. Right? Like, when we permabanned Tyler1 could still play League of Legends. He just had to keep making new accounts that we didn't know about. Right? Ideally, things like Vanguard help us solve those problems in the long run, where Vanguard we can start doing things like hardware banning people, right? And then additionally, it's like ideally, Twitch would have terms of service that ban people who are actively ruining games. But that's a Twitch thing. That's not a Riot thing. Riot can't do anything about that. But there's nothing in Twitch's TOS, as far as I know, to prevent a person from streaming themselves ruining the game, right? Like, that's just a thing. And by the way, that's a very hard terms of service thing to say. Like, what is ruining the game, right? That's a... When I say that, I immediately take it back, because how in the world would Twitch ever be able to make a rule like that and actually enforce it, right? Like, it's like that's a very suspect rule to enforce. And that's the hard part about moderation, is that there's so many like degrees of it. But yes, so is this guy permanently running it down good? No. Like, he's awful human, and right, like, and we will ban the accounts, but then he's just going to get more. And so the question really is like, how do you stop the person from getting those accounts? And like, then it's some things like, oh, well, maybe Vanguard helps with that because it gives us the ability to do things like hardware bans. But again, I'm not really privy to all the details of that either. So who knows? Please look into EVELYNN. She's a 49% win rate as an OTP character. So whether or not EVELYNN is strong or weak, and I would guess, by the way, it's probably possible that she is weak. Generally, personal opinion is that assassins are kind of weak, and EVELYNN's probably, gotten bopped a bit. A very common misconception is that less popular characters are OTP'd. It's like, hey, EVELYNN is an OTP character, right? The reality of this statement is like, the reality of that is that for the most part, characters in League of Legends aren't really like played significantly more or significantly less than each other in terms of one tricks. There are some, but like as an example, EVELYNN is like dead average for being mained. She has mains, but just as many mains as she also just has players who just play her, for less mained. And so the idea that she's a one-trick character is just incorrect compared to the rest of the roster. Again, every character has mains, but there's only a few characters on either end that stand out as being really, really heavily mained compared to everybody else, or really, really under-mained compared to everybody else. So as an example, a character who is highly mained is Zyra. Zyra is one of the highest, most mained champions in League of Legends, and has been for like literal years. Like almost a decade at this point. So there are characters that are way more mained than everybody else. But EVELYNN is not one of them. EVELYNN is not mained, it's a double negative. EVELYNN has mains, but no more than really any other elite character. She's just mained in terms of averages the same as everybody else, on average. So anyways, I personally would agree that I think assassins are a little weak, and I think AP assassins, probably their items have been hit to the point where they're kind of sag. But like EVELYNN doesn't really stand out as a character who's like, would need to have a higher win rate because of how mained she is. How do I feel about SION? He's been buffed twice now, but they don't really seem to hit the mark. My opinion personally on SION is that he needs to be less fair. SION is a character who, in isolation, every single one of his spells is fair. His W is fair, his Q is fair, his E is fair, his R is fair. His passive is maybe a little unfair, but after we nerfed it, it got a lot more fair as well. And I think it's very important that every character in League of Legends does something unfair. It is important that your character does something that is for you. And if your character isn't doing something that's for you in your wheelhouse, in your camp, your character is probably going to feel a lot worse to play regardless of their win rate. And so my take on SION is, I wonder if we're supposed to look at something on his kit and say, this is more for SION. So as an example, maybe the ultimate is supposed to be easier to hit. As an example, maybe the E, which is pretty easy to hit, is supposed to do significantly more damage. As an example, maybe the recast time on the shields be lower, so it's like a lot easier for SION to proc it and then pop it on someone and hurt them with it, right? My take on SION is I think over the years he's gotten very fair, and I don't know if he should be as fair. When is FIZZ's items getting a buff? FIZZ's items would probably not be getting a buff. We deliberately nerfed them because we don't want damage in the item system to be all that potent. My argument about FIZZ is I personally think he got Riot specialed, and personally I think we should buff him. But it is a hard argument to make because FIZZ wins, I believe, 51% of his games. And so let's go take a look at FIZZ. He wins 51% of his games. Now, my opinion is FIZZ is supposed to win 52% of his games. I genuinely believe this is a character who is fairly straightforward and fairly abusable in lane, and I think he's supposed to be like one of those higher win rate characters. And so, personal take is that FIZZ has probably got a bit Riot specialed. On the flip side, though, he wins 51% of his games. So, it is hard to justify a buff when his win rate is like that. 52% win rate in Diamond Plus. Oh my god. I'm gonna go... Y'all know what's coming. Y'all know what's coming. Also, surprised you came from YouTube. There's so many YouTubers here. I should really start a YouTube channel. All those clips. And none of them are from me. Here is my daily educational session on why data is a bunch of organized lies and you need to learn how to interpret it. If you go to Diamond Plus and you sort by win rate, you'll see a lot of characters who have really high win rates in Diamond Plus. And you might think, what is Riot doing? In fact, we can go even crazier. Let's go to Master Plus and look at win rates here. What is Riot doing? Anivia is 58. Do we know how to balance the game? The thing you have to consider when you look at higher MMR win rates is that the average win rate in high MMR is higher as well. So as an example, if we're sorting by Master Plus and you're looking at win rates, the vast majority of characters win more than 50% of their games. There's only a few that win less than 50, a very few. The math doesn't add up. On the flip side, if you go to Iron and you look at what's going on in Iron and you sort by win rate, the vast majority of characters win less than 50% of their games, which makes sense because Iron players, it turns out, aren't all that great at League of Legends compared to some of the Bronze players that they're matched against. And so the thing you need to remember when you're looking at win rates on sites like LoLalytics is, are they correcting for the average win rate at that elo? And many sites do not do that. So daily PSA that you need to not just take data at face value, you need to read it a bit more to better understand exactly what's going on there. So when you say something like FIZZ's 52% win rate in Diamond, he's probably in that case only 51 or 50% win rate in Diamond, which, you know, isn't terrible, but that's not 52. That's not actually 52. So, yeah. Cho's gotten a couple of buffs lately with mostly damage increase on abilities. Would decreasing the clunkiness of the kit instead of a way to instead be a way to decrease how good he feels to play? Cho Q and W are both 0.5 second cast times. So, yes, we could make the character have less cast times, but that doesn't always mean it's good, right? It's kind of like, yes, Cho is suffering, and yes, we need to buff him, and we've been doing it, but it's like, just because a character is weak, it doesn't mean we should get rid of their weaknesses, right? That might mean sometimes we do it, but, you know, as a more extreme example, there was one entire 6 months where JHIN was weak. The only time. JHIN's had moments where he's weak, but there's only one time in history where JHIN was truly weak. And during that time, I got a lot of comments directed at me of like, well, hey, why don't you just remove his reload? He's clunky, he has to reload, no one else has to do it, you'll make him viable if he just has to reload. And that's one way you could balance a character, is making them more standardized, more like in line with the rest of the roster. Or you can make sure that the costs they have on their kit, like say CHO'GATH's cast time, are worth it, right? So it could be that the problem CHO'GATH has is that, yeah, he has these cast times, but also it's like, can he get tanky enough? Is his ultimate threatening enough? Is his Q dangerous enough when it actually hits you? Things like that, right? On one hand, you can make him more reliable. On the other hand, maybe you're just supposed to pay out those unreliable things at a better and more aggressive rate. Is there any way to let Vi work as a bruiser damage-wise instead of being an R-bot? I mean, Vi is a bruiser. Character does quite a bit of damage. I don't know what you're looking for, to be honest. Vi, if she gets on you, does quite a bit of damage. Scary champ. That said, she is balanced a lot more around pro play than she used to be. So that probably means that for the average player, she might feel less potent in any given situation. Like, historically, for the average player, Vi would be balanced around having like more of like a 51, 52% win rate, you know, which, you know, means that if she gets on you, she kind of just beats you up. Whereas now, because her R is so valued in competitive play with all those pesky 80 carries running around, she tends to be balanced lower, which, you know, long term maybe means she feels a bit worse to play in the average game, but that's the life of Vi and being in pro.